All right, guys, let's get into this. We're going to be analyzing and commenting on the Libertarian Party vice presidential debate. Let's get this going. Let's see what these candidates have to say. We're starting in just a couple seconds here, and we're going to see which one of the vice presidential candidates. Oh, here we go.
Good evening. My name is Jim Turney. I am coming to you live from Altamont Springs, Florida. And that's what you see behind me here. It's a beautiful city near Orlando, Florida. I am elected as a city commissioner here, and I'm very proud of my city. And I hope when the Libertarian Party has its in-person aspect of the national convention in July, that since that's only a short drive from here on the other side of Orlando, that you'll stop into Altamont Springs. But everyone else here in this debate for the vice presidential nomination of the Libertarian Party, which we're going to hold this weekend in a live online convention, everyone is in their hometown. So I'm the only one that's in Orlando right now, and hopefully you'll all be in July because we're opening things back up around here over the next month. Mm-hmm. The Libertarian Party, like I said, is having this convention to select our presidential candidate and our vice presidential candidate online over the course of the next 3 days, Memorial Day. We were going to be in Austin, Texas doing this in person.
Yes, we understand what an election is. Let's see if we can get to the point at some point.
And all the other plans that people have made over the last few months have been set aside in most cases. So we have a similar, I hope you watched the presidential debate, which just ended 15 minutes ago with John Stossel moderating. And we have a similar kind of setup here with our vice presidential candidates, except that I'm probably not as good as John is at moderating. And I also don't have a timer with me. So we're going to do our best to keep it fair and so I want to start by mentioning the names of the three people who, delegates to the Libertarian Party, use tokens to select who can be in this debate and the order in which they're going to appear to you to give their opening statements of 2 minutes each. That's first one will be Larry Sharp, then Spike Cohen.
Okay, here we
Ken
go.
Armstrong.
Let's see what these guys have to say. Now things are getting exciting.
2 minutes to start things off. Good evening.
Hey everybody, I'm so glad that you have taken some time this evening to hear us talk. I think it's great. You probably heard me talk many times before. Why in the world would I jump into this race? It's a very important reason. For those of you who know me, you know I don't want to do this just to do this. I want to do this and sacrifice my time, sacrifice your time, bug you for money, sacrifice my money and everything because I want impact. Judge Jim Gray came to me with an actual plan to make impact. He came to me with a plan that might actually get us to win, and if we don't win, to at least ensure that we can help down ballot and help ballot access for this year and for 4 years to come. Am I prepared to sacrifice 6 months of my life for that? Yes, and I know you are too. And that's what I want us to achieve. We can do this here. We can actually make impact. Maybe win. I hope we can. Maybe the craziness of this COVID virus will allow people to do something that we never thought they would do. Maybe that lightning will strike, and that'd be great. And if it does, then a judge becomes the president, and he will help and assist all of us in the future for the next 4 years, winning at the local level, winning in our states, winning in our towns, because that is how this movement's really going to grow. It's going to grow from the ground up. It's going to grow from the local level. That's what I'm trying to achieve. I hope you all will join me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Larry, Spike.
Now, there's not much been said yet so far, but let's get into this. Already, we're fixating on sort of the non-libertarian, non-issues. If the goal is to build up a party, the other party's already built. This is not to criticize Larry Sharp at all, who I have a lot of respect for, but I want the vice presidential candidate to get out there with guns blazing. Listen, in media interviews, you often have just 2 or 3 minutes to talk, and I want to make sure that in those 2 or 3 minutes, we're talking about cutting government. So far, I haven't heard anything about cutting government. Let's see how Spike fares.
Cohen, you're up, sir.
Hey, everybody, I'm Spike Cohen. For those who don't know me, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a business owner who started a web design company back in 1999. About 3 years ago, I sold that company so that I could focus my life on my real passion, which is spreading the message of freedom to a public that often has never heard of things like self-ownership, non-aggression, property rights, voluntary solutions, the libertarian message, using the leadership, marketing, and communication skills that I learned from starting, growing, and operating a successful business. I became the co-owner of Muddy Waters Media, the host of My Fellow Americans, and the co-host of the Muddy Waters of Freedom. We have a following in the tens of thousands and a reach in the millions on all social media and podcasting platforms. And we've achieved this by using entertainment to expose disillusioned, disenfranchised voters to libertarian beliefs, values, and solutions. Hosting and producing 2 live libertarian programs and interacting with countless people over these years, I've come to realize that in order for the Libertarian Party to beat the Republicrats and begin to make changes at the political level by winning statewide and federal elections, as well as many more local and regional down ballot elections, we need to be able to move the needle in the direction of liberty at the cultural level. We can only make changes if we get elected. We can only get elected if we get people to know who we are and what solutions we propose. And we can only get people to know us by engaging them where they are. I am running to defeat the Republicrats and their cronies using a dynamic, engaging, and empathetic style of messaging so that we can actually achieve freedom in our time. Thank you.
Now I like Spike a lot. I'm not gonna hide that fact. I'm a huge fan of Spike. But in that opening statement, Spike, who's so great at communication, I mean, an incredible communicator. He's so funny. He's so witty. He's just so on point. And yet, in that whole time, I didn't hear a single thing about cutting government. Now, if you compare Spike, who's an amazing communicator, to Harry Brown, the gold standard of libertarian communicators, what do you see is the difference? Harry Brown talks about cutting government right away. And over here, neither Spike nor Larry, these are 2 great communicators, use their communication skills to actually change anybody's views on anything. Now, here's a simple fact. Spike is right that we need to change culture. But he's wrong when he says that we need to get elected to change culture. And that's simply not true. Many of the most influential people who've changed culture weren't really elected to anything. Listen, I don't know a lot about John Locke, but I don't remember him being elected to anything. And yet he shaped the entire ideology of democracy. He led to so many political changes. Spike is the type of thinker that can do that. But so far, I haven't seen him do that. Let's see what happens next.
Thank you, Spike. And now, Armstrong. Well,
hey there, I'm Ken Armstrong. I'm talking to you from a 100-year-old hunting cabin in the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. And I've been on the road for nearly a year now. In fact, I actually kicked off my campaign a year and about 3 days ago in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So I've had an opportunity over the last year, traveling 51,000 miles by road, visiting 47 states with my wife and my friend Earl and Duke the Wonder Dog, to visit with libertarians everywhere in the country, and to visit with just ordinary people and talk to them about the principles of liberty and of the Libertarian Party. And I'll tell you, we have had an exciting year. I went from no name recognition in the party to just the other day, I picked up the endorsement of the Libertarian Pragmatist Caucus. And if you don't know, LPC has a track record of picking winners in this race. They endorsed Joe Jorgensen for president, and we just saw Joe in the presidential debate. An absolutely fabulous performance. Really excited at the opportunity of seeing perhaps a woman on the debate stage this year next to the 2 old men that the other 2 parties are going to put forward. Or maybe it'll be Jim Gray, and we'll see what the judge brings with him. But I've got to tell you what I bring with me. I bring 40 years of experience in government and in leadership. I've had people on both sides of the aisle listen to my advice and my leadership. And I've spent 40 years in government and nonprofits, and I want to share that with you, and that's what we're going to be talking about this evening.
I have to say, these have been three disappointing opening statements. You saw in the presidential debate at least people talking about cutting government right from the beginning. You heard Jacob Hornberger talking about cutting government, John Mon talking about cutting government. If I remember correctly, Joe Jorgensen also talked about cutting government. We have so many people in that presidential level who are talking about actual changes. So far in this debate, we have heard literally nobody say a single thing either about cutting government or a single thing that they just couldn't just say as a Republican or a Democrat. Listen, I live inside the Beltway. I grew up inside the Beltway. I live in D.C. I grew up in D.C. Nothing that's been said so far is not something you could have said in any political party, in any political area, of any political kind that I've ever heard of. So far, consider me less than pleased.
Well, outstanding timing. All of you came in a few seconds before the bell went off.
Oh, nice.
It's a good view. So we are, so to speak, on TV in the modern context, internet sort of television, and there are, especially by the time you count the recording that's being made of this, I suspect that there will be thousands of people who watch this, either watching it now live or later. So it's real. I want each of you to give me in 1 minute or less, how do you make the case for the Libertarian Party? To get those voters out there that are watching right now. Some of them are not members of the Libertarian Party. They're just checking us out.
All right, a nice softball question. Now, this is a question where you can talk about cutting a lot of government. And I would have to say that if at least Spike doesn't talk about cutting some major government, I'll be shocked. But my guess is all three will manage to bring up actual big major cuts to government in their answers. Let's actually take a look.
Spike, would you like to go first on this? You got 60 seconds to make the case for the Libertarian Party.
Sure, absolutely. So I've learned from my years in running my business and now my years in Muddy Waters Media, I've learned that the vast majority of people innately understand that something is wrong here. They see what's happening around us. They see the pandemic that we're living under because government didn't let healthcare workers test and contain this virus when they could have. And now how the states are telling everyone that they can't go outside and they can't, they can't do anything. And if they do, they have to wear a mask and that it's their fault if they get infected. People innately understand that something is wrong here. With all of the signals that they get from government and corporate media, where they're constantly told, everything is fine, just listen to us, do what we say, and nothing bad will happen to you. And of course, if you don't do what we say, terrible things will happen to you. Mm-hmm. They understand that there's something wrong here. They just need someone to present themselves in an empathetic and sympathetic way to demonstrate that we understand and are listening to them, that we hear what they're saying, that we understand their issues, and then propose the libertarian solutions, and to give them the libertarian message. You
okay,
own
what are those
yourself,
libertarian solutions?
You own your life, you own your body, you own your labor, and you own your property, and we will stand alongside you against anyone who would try to take it from you.
Oh,
so close. So close. Spike, you're right there. You're so close. And then you decided not to talk about it. You could have talked about any of the income tax. You could have talked about any policy position. And I know these are things you believe in. I mean, even though Spike is running with Vermin, Spike and I actually are more politically seen as similar. We're both considered, ANCAP, right-leaning conservatives, if you will. But what's happening here? I've seen Spike talk about cutting all kinds of things, and yet not a single cut mentioned from even Spike. This does not bode well. Let's see what happens next.
Okay, thank you, Spike. Ken, over to you. You're talking to people who are not already in the party. Give us 60 seconds to convince them. What would you say?
Well, we absolutely...
Guys, I'm going to be really disappointed if the default sentences, I've put two sentences over here, and the welfare state and the income tax. So right now, I, as just a guy watching this debate, have managed to talk about two big cuts to government. So far, the participants have talked about 0 cuts to government. If by the end of this, I'm ahead, if it's like 2-0 or 2-1, I'm going to be I'm honestly going to be surprised because you have some great communicators here. But I'm also going to be very, very disappointed. Well, let's see what happens.
absolutely don't need to do a lot of convincing today. Just yesterday, the second city in Alabama to declare bankruptcy announced that decision. That's a direct result of state and federal management of this crisis situation. My background in crisis management tells me that the three things that they should be doing, communication, coordination, and logistics, they've gotten consistently 3 Fs, the governments have, in managing this crisis. And the tyrants at the state and federal level who've used executive authority to tell people what to do instead of giving them information and allowing them to make decisions for their lives. They've preached to the choir in terms of what we need and the fact that we need libertarian principles running this country.
Okay, so Ken kind of almost talked about a cut there. Almost hinted at a cut, saying that the federal government had done a terrible job. But the average person listening to this isn't going to know if it means cutting the government from doing it, having the state government doing it, having city governments do it. I mean, I'm assuming, reading very deeply between the lines here, that what Ken is talking about is allowing private organizations to very quickly deploy and respond, which is what private organizations do well and government never does at all. But you have to read really far between the lines over there. So far, I'm going to count that as 0 cuts so far.
Thank you. And very sharp, 60 seconds to sell the Libertarian Party to those people watching who are not already voting for us.
Well, they're not watching us, but that's okay. You guys are. And what you need to remember is people who are afraid make bad decisions. That's how it works. When they're afraid, they don't go, let me look for libertarian. No, they don't. They cry for a strong man or they cry for socialism. Both get us to dictatorship. And that's where we're going now. What we have to do is make them not afraid, because right now they are. COVID and Trump and Biden and Russians. Instead, we have to be radical enough for them to say, but at the same time, familiar enough for them to go, oh, yeah, that's not so crazy. I could say yes. I had many failures in my New York State gubernatorial run, but one of them that worked was the idea of regulating cannabis like onions. Regulate sounds safe. Onions, not much regulation. So it's radical enough, but familiar enough. And that's still to this day, I get recognized, and I get recognized. People yell, regulate like onions on the streets when I'm around. It works. Radical enough to be real and to make change, but familiar enough so that people hear it.
Honestly, I did not see this coming. Right now, Larry Sharpe is the first person to at least mention a cut in government. Legalizing marijuana is an actual cut in government. Regulating marijuana like onions is a cut in government. So right now, if we're just going to let, and I know there's more to it than just how much can you cut, but if we're just looking at who is cutting the most, shockingly, I would have bet on Spike, because Spike is an ANCAP voluntarist and he seems to like government about as much as I do. Unbelievably enough, right now, Larry Sharpe, who would be seen, I think, by most as the most moderate, has said the most cuts. Let's see where this goes.
All right. So I need to stop this thing. You went overtime for a few seconds. All right, so that's what the bell sounds like when you go overtime. So let's see. Let's start with you, Larry, on this one. Tell us a little bit about how you became a libertarian, especially any personalities or any book you read that helped you make that conversion moment that you wanted to be self-libertarian.
The most important piece here is, for many people, they came to libertarianism through politics. I didn't. I came through business. An author by the name of Robert Ringer. I was using many of his books when I was training and teaching and consulting in business. And that kind of brought me into that world. But the number one thing that actually made me become a libertarian was, believe it or not, hearing Gary Johnson speak in 2012. I was basically finished with politics in general. I didn't care anymore. But Gary Johnson spoke. I said, oh, this makes some sense. And then I actually, for the first time, joined a party, met people. My first vote for libertarians was, of course, Gary Johnson and Judge Jim Gray, which is another reason why I trust him so much and why I want him to be our nominee. I trust him and I know him, and he was my first vote along with Gary Johnson. And that's what brought me into the party. 4 years or so, I was supporting the party either through money or through my works or driving our gubernatorial candidate in 2014 to do debate prep. And then 2016, I ran for VP, 2018 for governor, 2020, I'm back again.
Oh, thank you. Spike, tell us how you got.
So that was an honest answer, I suppose, but it was again a missed opportunity. The reason that I'm harping on this is because, with the exception of Larry, I've probably done the most media of any of the people, and Larry might have done more than I have. I'm not sure. But here's the fact: when you are on national or international TV, you have 30 seconds, you have a minute, and if your first minute, if they ask you a question like, "Tell me how you became a libertarian," and you don't get to any major cuts, you've squandered that. Now, you haven't pulled a Bill Weld where you endorse the opposing candidate, but you've squandered that. You have a minute to reach 1 million, 2 million, 10 million people with some bold, powerful idea. Regulate marijuana like onions? Fantastic. But I want to see that energy in every single sentence, because telling them, let me tell you this, having been in national leadership, that's what it's going to take to actually get something out. If you want to get a major cut to government through all the media censors, you have to have it on every sentence. Here's the thing that happened to me once. I was being interviewed by Fox. I was asked the same question. And I was grilled for half an hour for a 30-second soundbite. And I knew that if I didn't talk about cutting government in every sentence, they were not going to put a big cut to government in there, because that's not what they're about. And I did get a cut to government in every sentence. So here's what they did. They took one of my sentences and cut it in half. So it is not easy to get a bold idea past the media censors. I've learned how to do it to a certain extent through practice, but also through a lot of training. Those of you guys who've ever played Carla Howell's Who's Driving, it is great training to help make sure you're driving home a useful, important point, so that the media we get less media than other people, we actually use it for something good, something powerful. Let's see what Spike does with this.
To calling yourself a libertarian.
That's a good question. So originally I was a neocon, believe it or not, a few years ago, probably about, well, I guess 15 years ago now. What first brought me even to listening to the ideas of libertarianism was actually seeing with my business, seeing firsthand how at every single step of the way, government puts regulatory burdens and other things in place.
See, Spike has an unfair advantage. He's just cool. Spike is just a cool guy. He radiates coolness. You can see that on this video. If you follow him on Facebook, he just radiates it. I feel like that's an unfair advantage. So I'm going to hold Spike to an even higher standard. Let's see what happens
tax
here.
Burdens and everything else to make it hard for entrepreneurs and small businesses and the people that are working for them to actually do what we need to do, to actually get ahead in life and to try to, grow something and provide for our families. And so that kind of brought me into the libertarians, who seem to be the ones who were, overwhelmingly across the board saying all of these things are wrong. Republicans seem to be okay with some regulations and Democrats seem to be okay with some other types of regulations, but libertarians seem to be consistently against it. And so that got me into the party and the movement. But then it was reading things like The Law by Bastiat or No Treason by Spooner. These were things that really had me realize that the problem wasn't just the Republicans and the Democrats. The problem is the very nature of the big state, big government that we live under that presumes to have total authority over us and can rule over us. So that's how I became a libertarian.
Oh man, that's one of the, it's so much there. It's just, it's right there. But he could have talked about actually getting rid of that state apparatus, moving things forward. Listen, let me put it like this, and here's why this is important. I could go on and list all the negative side effects of chemotherapy in a second, right? You lose your hair, you vomit a lot, you lose weight, you lose body mass, your teeth can fall out. And there's a lot of bad things about chemotherapy, but people still do it because the alternative is worse. What we need to have in the communicators, president and vice president, both need to be able to drive home the specific policies, the big cuts, and why they're good. So far, the only person who's actually mentioned an actual memorable cut or a cut at all so far is Larry Sharpe. Let's see what happens next.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, Ken, it's your turn to tell us about your first moments.
Yeah, I have to thank the Democratic Party for making me a libertarian. Thank you, Democratic Party. I really appreciate it. I was in party leadership in Hawaii, Democratic Party leadership in Hawaii. I was elected to a local county office, and I was being groomed for state office and beyond, and really thought I was on my way. And then I took a stand against the Democratic governor on a tax increase, and I got invited to resign my committee chairmanship, and I pretty much got excommunicated from the party at that point. And that was when I met Tracy Ryan, the perennial chair of the Libertarian Party in Hawaii. We testified to the Senate about the proposed tax increase and marriage equality bills and other things. And I grew into the Libertarian Party from that point. So again, thank you, Democrats, for making me a libertarian.
Okay, look at that. We're 17 minutes into this debate. So far, one cut to government has been mentioned. So far, me just quickly writing end the welfare state, end the income tax, just to have something at the bottom of the screen, is literally ahead in terms of cuts to government compared to this. Now, I get that the moderator isn't asking questions about cutting government. So the hell what? You think any reporter is going to ask you about cutting government? I don't think a single one has ever asked me. It doesn't stop me from talking about it. Look at my interviews on RTV, ZTV, MSNBC. You'll see that I drive home that point. And if you want to see who does it even better, who's the best at this, look at videos of Harry Brown. Harry Brown drives home cuts to government all day long. So far, 17 minutes, one cut mentioned.
Oh, that's a perfect lead in to the question I had up here, which is that most people in the party and outside the party believe that we're going to elect people to local office. Like myself, I'm honored to serve here in Altamont Springs. So the question I have is, so since that's where we're going to be winning first, what made you decide that you wanted to run for a national office for vice president rather than a local office? Go first on this one. Thank you.
Well, actually, as most people know, I started off by running for president. I believe you go big or you don't go at all. And I just saw that the problems in the country were so huge. It was not some burning bush that told me I was going to be the president of the United States. It was just a conviction that I needed to do this thing. I needed to run. When I look at pictures of my grandchildren and I think about the world that they were growing up in, I couldn't imagine not trying to do something about it. And with my background, with my resume, honestly, the best fit was to try to return the federal government to the people.
Now that was actually not terrible. Up till the last sentence, everything that Ken said, every single word of it could have been said by a Democratic or a Republican or a Green. I mean, every part of it was, trying to help the people. At the end, talking about returning the power of the federal government to the people, it's not specific, it's not debatable, it's not memorable, but it's something. If I was going to call that, I would call that a tenth of a cut. So right now, we would say between the three candidates, including Spike, who I just admire so much, including Spike, so far, I'm going to say we have 1.1 cuts mentioned in this entire debate so far. I am going to be just mortified if end the welfare state and the income tax has more cuts in it than the entire debate. Let's see what happens next.
All right. Thank you. Larry, tell me why you're not running for local office. I know you ran for governor, but why now for vice president instead of for local office?
Well, for the same reason that I ran for VP in 2016, I believed that I could be the best support for Governor Johnson. That's what I thought, right? For a living, I train, I teach, I coach. That's what I do for a living. I help people with emotional communication. It's what I do. And I thought I would really be able to help Governor Johnson to be a better presidential candidate. And I think I can make Judge Jim Gray be a better presidential candidate. My goal is always impact. I don't want to run just to run. That's a waste of time, energy, and money, donor burnout, activist burnout. If I'm going to ask you to jump through the hoops for me, I want to give you something. I ran for governor of New York because I knew I could get ballot access. Even though I lost the race, I gained ballot access. We got 100 new libertarians in the state the next year. And I built out a team across the entire country, and a bunch of them are running. So I want impact. I thought I could do it in 2016. I did it in 2018. I think I can do it now.
Now, realistically, in 2016, Larry Sharpe was by far the best choice of libertarian presidential candidates. Now, that wasn't a hard bar to beat because the other choice was Bill Weld, between Bill Weld and Gary Johnson. Now, I know that there was a lot of other candidates running, but of the ones that had a lot of support, now, obviously, someone like Will Coley is going to have a huge amount of support from someone like me because I think that kind of boldness is fantastic. But had we gone with Larry Sharpe in 2016, that would have been much better than going with Bill Weld, who literally endorsed Hillary. And now, listen, Larry and I have disagreed on plenty of things, but I think we can both agree that endorsing the opponent 3 days before the race is just plain dumb. I don't see Larry Sharpe doing that at the very least. And right now, honestly, he's still ahead in terms of talking about cuts. He has 1 versus 0 so far.
It's about making impact, not about winning. In reality, I'm not going to be the VP, but can I help us to grow? Yes. And why am I not going to be the VP? Because even if we win this thing and the judge gets selected as the president, they don't pick me for the VP. They pick somebody else. That's how the Constitution works. I'm running for support staff. I want to support. I'm the Obi-Wan Kenobi, if I can be, and I help the rebels win,
right,
even though I get killed.
Time's up. Okay, Spike, over to you. Tell us why you prefer to run for vice president instead of for local office, please.
Jim, we're never going, obviously we run to win, but we're never going to win until we change the conversation. In the Libertarian Party's 49-year history, we haven't won a single federal or statewide election. No president, no vice president, no governor, no Senate, no Congress, none of that. We will be able to do that. If we're ever going to do that in this election cycle or any other, we have to take control of the conversation. We have to take control of a conversation that right now is just 2 groups of people arguing how much bigger government should be, how much more control it should have, how much more expensive it should be, how much more it should spend and run up debt on our behalf.
You're right there, Scott.
If we're going to change that,
yes,
we have to change the conversation. I believe that the role of a vice presidential candidate and of a vice president is to give his president the advice on matters of policy and strategy, but also to provide a bully pulpit and to draw a line in the sand. I want to draw a line in the sand and put on one side of that line those of us who want to take the boots off the necks of the American people as they try to solve the problems that they face, which often are created.
I was so sure it was going to be this time that Spike was going to talk about cutting government because he talked about that it was kind of a little bit too big. But then literally everything Spike, and Spike is a world-class communicator. Everything that Spike said is something that a Democrat or Republican candidate could have said. Come on, we can get a little bit bolder than this.
By government, and on the other side, put the people who want to continue to allow that harm to happen just to preserve their power.
All right, great. Well, that actually more or less answered my the next question up here, which is about supporting the presidential candidate. You did a pretty good job at that, Spike. So I kind of hate to ask you to repeat that since you went into that. So let me ask this. Since messaging is important, you kind of went into this too. Still, let me ask, messaging is very important in a political campaign, and targeting is. What about, what would you say as the vice presidential nominee? If you're our nominee, what is the message that you want to hammer home as the vice presidential candidate? You're going first on this one, Spike.
Okay. Yeah, the message is very clear, Jim.
Okay, so now on this one, please. On this, I mean, there's almost no way to not talk about cutting government on this one. I mean, there's almost no way to avoid it. Let's see what happens here.
You own yourself. You own your body and your labor and your property, and you own your life, and they are taking from you, and it doesn't work. This goes back to the basics of libertarian beliefs and libertarian ethos. We don't just believe that that aggression is bad because you shouldn't take from each other. Of course it is. We believe it's bad because it doesn't work. If I can take from you all day long and I don't have to actually be a good steward of the things that I earn, then I'm going to make bad decisions with what I take. And if you know that I can just take from you at any given time, then you're going to be not as good of a steward because you could lose that at any time. That is the wages of the bad central planning that we live under. And it is intuitively understandable. When I speak to college students on college campuses, when I speak to people in housing projects, in my door knocking tours, everywhere that I go, when I go to small businesses, everywhere that I go, I tell them the same thing. The reason this is failing is because it was designed to fail. Because the people who presume authority over you and believe that they are your betters, even though we almost universally recognize them as the biggest idiots and sociopaths and panderers among us, it is designed that way, and we intend to dismantle that system.
Okay. Intending to dismantle that system. You know what? I'm counting that as a cut. I'm going to say that Spike has mentioned one cut and Larry has mentioned one cut. And by the way, Spike brought up a really interesting point there. I hope you guys caught that. This idea that if you know your money can be stolen from you, you're not going to take care of your money as well. And if you're stealing money, you're not going to take care of that money very well. It's an interesting point. It's well stated. It's a very nuanced point. Is it ready? Is it something that you could get through major media? I mean, I doubt it, but maybe. I mean, Spike is a world-class communicator. If anyone can do it, he can. But what I would love to see is some clear, comprehensible cuts that where you understand what it is that's being cut and what's going to be gone, and then we can debate whether that's happening or not. Let's see what happens with Ken.
Thank you. Ken, you about how would you support the presidential nominee and what's your message as a vice presidential candidate?
Well, first of all, my message needs to be, my number one job is not screw it up for the president, or the presidential candidate. So I really need to be synchronized with the presidential candidate. And there are a couple, particularly Jim and Joe, that I would be very, very happy to synchronize with. But my job is to expand on their message, expand on their reach, to touch the people who would listen to somebody with my kind of background, because I come from a different level of experience and a different kind of background than both of them do. So I would be able to reach people that they can't reach, and I would be able to express the libertarian principles to the workers, the minimum wage workers like I have been, and the highest level of government like I've been, and everything else in between.
Great, thank you. And Larry, give you a chance for this too.
Sure. Look, the biggest issue is I'm here to support the president to the best of my ability. Assist him or her with the idea of how can I communicate best, right? When I deal with a judge, what we try to do often is break the monopoly of government, right? That's what people actually will hear. There are a lot of people in my state, New York and California, who think government's a great idea. There's no other answer but government. But when I say to them, do you like monopoly? They go, no, monopoly's terrible. Awesome. Isn't government monopoly? Yeah, it is. Shouldn't we have another way of making that work so you can actually get your communities to work again? And they say yes. And before you know it, it starts working. What I want to do is be able to support our presidential candidate so they can communicate best, to get the average person to hear us. There is the critical piece. They just have to hear us. It isn't my job to set the actual message. It's my job to make sure that I get our president to say the message the right way. They're not going to be voting for us. They're going to vote for a president.
Did Larry Sharp just go full ANCAP? I am actually puzzled right now. Hold on here. I don't know if Larry Sharp meant break the stranglehold of the two-party system, in which case, that's not that controversial. Or did he say that we should have competing private governments? Is he sort of going with the Adam Kokesh, no federal government, or no federal, no state, no local government, only private governments? If Larry Sharp is talking about private governments, well, that is an unexpected turn in this debate, to put it mildly. Let's see what happens here.
Presidential candidate. I've got to make sure I can put my ego in my pocket when it's required and support the person ahead of me.
All right, thank you. Well, let me break with you all on the next series of questions, which you sort of slid into there a little bit, I guess. We have pretty clearly now we're going to see Donald Trump running for re-election, and we're going to see Joe Biden as the Democratic Party nominee. And both of them are even older than I am. And they're also quite like me. But you're different. You're a look different. You're from the North, and you're younger and a little more diverse ethnically. How would you help with letting a non-libertarian understand that party demonstrating its commitment to equality, especially with regard to race and gender. Can you give us a minute about that, Larry?
I'm actually not sure what you're asking me, but I'll say it anyway. The reality of it is I always talk about the idea of how do I pull people from poverty? How do I pull people from a bad situation? How do I pull people out of a bad world, whatever that is, discrimination, whatever the case may be? How do I pull them out? By giving them the ability to step out, by helping them, putting a hand out, putting community back in.
Now, honestly, I didn't really follow the question either. I think the question was about how you bring diversity to the party, and I guess by being a minority, we can bring diversity to the party. But let's see if Larry Sharpe talks about some good cuts to government here.
Government is not about helping. Government is about checking a box and servicing, and it does that well. It checks a box and services. It doesn't help anybody, though. So community helps. We draw that piece in. The reality of it is, Judge Jim Gray is very similar to other people running. That's true. The advantage is they have to listen to his ideas. They have to listen to him being different because he looks similar. There's an advantage. I know I just spun that, didn't I? Because I'm good at this. That's why I should be your VP.
All right. Thanks a lot. It's a question basically for us. If you are moved to let me rephrase it in case that wasn't clear. I wanted to know how the LP, and I think Larry got it, but he's different already. But you're a lot like the people that we're used to seeing in office, like me. And so, how would you help non-libertarians realize that libertarians are committed to equality and especially with respect to race and gender, the equality issues and those kind of things? What would you have to say about that?
Well, I think the first thing I have to do is I have to realize that I've never walked in their shoes. I mean, I'm a 63-year-old white guy who's held a lot of very fortunate positions in my life. But I have to say, I grew up in a very mixed racial neighborhood. I've lived overseas in places where I was in the minority. I have been in close relationships with people who are not old white men like myself. And the one thing that I've learned is I need to learn to listen to them. I need to hear them because I never will be able to walk a mile in their shoes.
Literally no part of that was anything that any Democrat or Republican Party person could have easily said. I mean, this is like right now, this debate has been about 95% political empty drivel, which is a shame. I've debated Ken Armstrong talking about ending the income tax. I mean, it's not that he can't do it. I've seen him do it. What's happening tonight? I don't know. Maybe it's too late or something. Spike is honestly quite possibly one of the few people who's more radical than I am. Not really seeing much of it yet. Right now, here's what's happening. They're letting the moderator run the debate. And when you're in a debate, when you're being interviewed in major media, you don't let the reporter or the moderator run it. You determine where the question is going to go. You decide what you're going to do with it. You steamroll the reporter if you need to. Listen, the last time I steamrolled reporters a couple days ago, but the last time before that, I knew doing it was going to get me kicked off that station for life, but it was still worth it because I was able to bring the message of freedom, self-determination, and sovereign territory to tens of millions of people. So sometimes it's worth it. Either way, you can't let the moderator run the debate. You got to take control of it and make this about your message. What is your message? And here's the thing. All the presidential candidates that are with, Vermin's kind of a hard one to quantify. They all have a message. You heard them talk about it just a few hours ago. But so far, we're not hearing a single thing or very few things that could be said by any Democrat or any Republican running for any position from local to office to president. Nothing differentiating has been said, and that's because they're not taking control of this thing. When you're in a debate, you need to grab control of the debate, not just let somebody else run it for you.
All right. Thank you. And same theme for you, Spike. What do you have to say about these issues of racial and gender equality and differentiation of our candidates, people like you and I, from other Americans?
Right. So, Jim, one of the things I've learned in going through all these different neighborhoods that I've gone through, and college campuses, which are incredibly racially and ethnically diverse, going into different neighborhoods of different ethnic makeups and different income levels, including marginalized communities. The one thing I've seen over and over again is that of those who are, racial minorities, ethnic minorities, gender and sexual minorities, religious minorities, the poor, immigrants, they aren't being engaged by Democrats and Republicans. At the most, they might be pandered to by Democrats, but they recognize that they're not actually being engaged and they're certainly not being served. The things that they're being promised are broken every single time. The Libertarian Party platform, from its beginning, is the one that is all for equality on racial lines, equality on ethnic lines, equality on income lines, equality on gender and sexual lines. We were calling for, allowing gay people to same-sex marriage decades ago before anyone else was.
All right. Now we're seeing a little bit of revisionist history. Spike is technically right that in our platform, it called for getting rid of laws against gay marriage decades ago. But the actual fact is that at that time, those who were trying to fight for those positions and later on fight for legalizing marijuana and ending the war on drugs were told by the people who today make up the Libertarian Party Pragmatist Caucus to shut up, they're scaring people too badly. And so instead of actually being part of that change, they're mostly on the sidelines. I wish it was different. And if I'm on major media or minor media or a blog or wherever I am, I will try to maybe subtly spin it, but I'm not going to outright lie. And the simple fact is this: the Libertarian Party was not part of the spearhead of that movement, not because we couldn't be, but we chose not to be out of fear. We've got to stop this thing where we wait for something to become popular before we support it. The one thing that I do respect about Judge Jim Gray, there's many things I respect. I should rephrase it. There are many things I respect about Judge Jim Gray, but the fact is he fought to end the war on drugs while the drug war was popular. Whereas today we have a lot of libertarians who said nothing about it when it was popular, and now that it's already unpopular are pretending like, they were fighting for it all along. There were certainly individual libertarians who were fighting for it, but for every one libertarian who was fighting for it boldly, there were 10 libertarians telling that one libertarian to shut the hell up. So I wish that what Spike was saying was true, but it's a point of historical fact. I'm not sure that it actually was.
But here's the thing. We go back to the message, the libertarian message. When you centralize power, the people who are in power will oppress the people who are not in power. And that includes those who are, ethnic and religious and gender and sexual and racial minorities. And so the libertarian message is explicitly designed to allow equality by decentralizing that power.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's see, I guess if I haven't lost track, let's start with Ken on this one. You had a lot of international experience, and it's sort of a similar theme to the last question. What are the borders, especially between Mexico and Canada, and generally the immigration questions and open borders? What do you have to say about that? Ken, let's start with you.
I think our goal has to be the free movement of people. Everything that we do has to move toward the free movement of people, the removal of any impediment on the borders and elsewhere for people to move freely. I think that we have to do that in steps that we can present to the American people. And I have a proposal for an international free trade zone that would go on the border between the United States and Mexico to really radically expand the ability to move freely between the countries, and putting a consulate in the middle of the international free trade zones, which would be paid for, by the way, entirely by entrepreneurial funds, not by tax money in any way. And each country would still retain their authority over their side of the border. So we don't have to tell Mexico what they're going to do, but we can begin to allow people to move freely by doing business inside the free trade zones and by expanding that so that we can show the American people that free movement of people really does work.
Wow, perfect.
All right, free movement of people. You know what? I'm going to count that as basically a cut. And now we're going to count that as a cut to government. And that wasn't a bad answer. Now, listen, I think it's an overly kind of milquetoast answer. I don't think it's a great answer. But honestly, if there's a candidate that's willing to cut some amount of government, I'm behind that 100%. What I'm not behind is a lot of candidates who don't seem to want to cut government at all. We see those throughout the Libertarian Party. Listen, when I ran the show Libertarians Working for You, LP National's official podcast, almost every single candidate refused to talk about cutting government and also insisted on talking about growing government for reasons surpassing my understanding. All right, let's see what happens next here.
Perfect timing. That's exactly 60 seconds. Larry, give us 1 minute about open borders or borders and immigration.
Yeah, the judge has been clear on this. He wants to basically copy the idea of a private Ellis Islands on the border, privately owned businesses, making sure that different businesses own each one of them so they can compete, allowing these Ellis Islands to be funded basically the same way that a recruiting company is funded today, allowing people to come and work as they want, cross the border and get documented, but not just crossing the border. People in our country now who are undocumented can go to any of these Ellis Islands and get documented. And so we can actually ensure that everyone can work the same as anyone else, live the same as anyone else. They want to cross their borders, go ahead. All countries can be happy.
Larry Sharp brings 2 cuts. That definitely counts. I mean, that definitely counts as a second cut. Now, I might think it's overly complicated, but still, it's way better than anything we have right now. And it's definitely a massive reduction to what the government's doing now. So finally, we have a candidate that's tied with, in terms of cuts, and there's more to communicating than cuts, but that is tied with end the welfare state and the income tax in terms of number of cuts, if not the size and the scope of them.
All right, thanks. And Spike, what do you have to say about borders and immigration?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, the thing with immigration is that not only does having open borders and allowing people to come in and leave, which by the way is what the U.S. was for the first 100 years of our existence, we had unlimited, unregulated migration, and we had none of the disasters that the nativist and the closed border people predict are going to happen if we allow people to come and go as they please for peaceful purposes. But it's not just a good idea, it's also a moral idea. It is wrong for government to limit migration. Migration controls are a violation of your right to host, hire, or house whomever you want on your property, and your right to travel to places where you are welcome, to properties where you are welcome. So there's no reason they should be involved in the first place. I propose that we go back to what the founders intended, allowing unlimited, unregulated migration both into and out of the country, the same way we have for across county lines and across state lines, because as long as they are coming for peaceful purposes, I'm not talking about an invading army force or some nonsense like that. I'm talking about peaceful people coming for economic reasons and for peaceful reasons. It is none of the government's business. We do not need paper to travel.
Finally, Spike gave the answer that I was looking for on any one of the questions. That's the Spike Cohen that I know. That's the Spike Cohen I follow on Facebook. That answer right there, that's a beautiful answer. I'm not going to, there's nothing I need to add to that answer.
So Spike, sort of stay with a similar theme and stay with you as the first responder to the next question about the U.S. military presence abroad. What do you think about that? In particular, NATO, if you believe we should stay in NATO, how would we get out? And what about the troops? What are we going to do with the troops abroad? You've got 60 seconds on that, please.
Bring them home, end the wars. Enough already. We just had a terror attack that happened on a Navy shipyard from a terrorist group. Supposedly, as it stands, it looks like it might be terrorism related, which means it came from a terror group which uses the anger of the American military presence, the bombing and destabilizing and invasion of countless nations and harming of other people abroad as blowback and as a recruitment tool to get people to come and fight against us and fight us here and fight us over there as well. Bring them home, end the fighting. Let's begin the healing. There's no reason to continue this. Some have suggested that we should not end the wars because it might cause a disruption in the job market. Okay, fine. bring them home and give them a salary for a year or so until they can find jobs, but end the fighting. There is no reason for us to continue with what the founders called entangling alliances, which has led to exactly what they predicted: endless war, endless suffering, and endless taxation and debt spending to pay for it. We are being robbed to finance chess games around the world at the cost of trillions of dollars and countless lives, and it needs to end.
Boom. Except for that random bit about welfare for a year that I didn't really agree with. That was an awesome answer. Now, here's the thing I want to bring up. Spike's last two answers should have been his first two answers. That could have been the answer to any one of the first three questions, whatever those softball questions were. Why are you a libertarian? How'd you become a libertarian? What do you like about libertarianism? Anyone, that last answer could have been an answer to any one of those questions. If you're going to be a leader in this movement or in any movement, you need to be ready to control the conversation. And that means that if someone asks you, why are you a libertarian? You give that answer. Spike, give that answer as why you're running for president, not whatever other boringness that I was exposed to at the first part of this thing. That was epic. That was awesome. That's what we need to see at the top of our ticket.
Thank you, Spike. Ken, let me ask you the same question, especially since you've actually served as a NATO base commander. What are your feelings about NATO and U.S. involvement
This would be interesting.
abroad?
Well, I think NATO's charter has been completed. The Cold War is over, and I think we can certainly begin to spin down that particular structure. I also think that with the technology and the various things that we have available to us, that we don't have to keep an American footprint all over the world. But the truth of the matter is, there are places like Okinawa where if we just close the base and bring the people home, we're going to do serious damage to the local economy there. So I think we need to transition through maybe a Peace Corps kind of arrangement with an international free trade zone on Okinawa, obviously something that would need to be negotiated with the Japanese government. But I don't think we just pick up and run, because the non-aggression principle says even though we're responsible for the damage that we've done there, we don't do more damage by undoing that. We need to ease out of the situation there.
Great, thank
that to me is kind of a nonsense
you.
answer.
Perfect time.
And here's why. Let me put this in perspective. There was a time, and I'll put this in a graphic perspective because this is a graphic thing. This is trillions of dollars being just wasted. There's their lives being disrupted. So let me use a graphic and disgusting example to drive home why I think this is wrong. There was a time in human history where if somebody was raped, the rapist was punished by having to marry the person that he had assaulted. So in other words, if you get raped by somebody, now you get to be married to that rapist. The thing to do is, once you've done damage, if that damage is there, don't increase the damage. Don't keep increasing the damage. The correct solution to Okinawa is to get the hell out of there. Same with Germany. Same with North Korea. Same with Iraq. Same with Afghanistan. Yeah, there's going to be some transitional costs, but the Japanese people are the literal most resourceful people on earth. Let's put this in perspective, and this is why this socialist solution that I'm hearing, I think is just utter and total nonsense. Let's look at the actual Japanese history, and we're going to compare it to American history. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were hit by nuclear bombs, the biggest disruption you can possibly do to a place. Detroit was hit by just the general government control of a welfare state that kept growing and becoming more welfare-y. Today, compare Detroit to Nagasaki. See where you'd rather live. See which economy is more thriving. See where you're seeing more innovation, more quality. Government does more damage than anything. It does more damage than a nuclear weapon does. So the correct answer for all those bases is to shut them down and bring the troops home right now. The first part, Ken was definitely right on. We got to get rid of NATO. Here's why. NATO had a mission. Win the Cold War. The Cold War is won. Get the hell out. The thing is finished. And we see this. This is something that the military is just afraid of saying. The military is afraid of saying mission accomplished. It's as if those two words don't exist in the military language. We had a huge infantry operation to kill one guy, Osama bin Laden. I think that's weird military strategy. If I was going to try to kill one guy, that isn't how I would do it if I was commander in chief. But for whatever its other shortcomings, it did technically speaking, work. So why the hell are we still over there? Mission accomplished, come home. Cold War, NATO, mission accomplished, come home. When a military operation is finished, you say mission accomplished, and then you come home. You don't keep on staying there forever and ever and ever. So yeah, pull out, get out of there right away, right now, shut down, bring the troops home. And to young people who are listening, the thing that you need to do is don't get involved in this mess in the first place. Do not enlist. Getting involved in this foreign policy doesn't mean you support this foreign policy. It doesn't mean you condone this foreign policy. It doesn't mean you're advertising for this foreign policy. It means you are doing the foreign policy. So if you don't agree with this foreign policy, and if you have half a brain, you shouldn't, don't enlist to do the foreign policy. Let's see what happens next.
Timing too. Well, what about American soldiers abroad and NATO especially?
I'm not sure. Did someone say that we shouldn't end the wars? I don't know who said that. That seems silly to me. The judge has been very clear. Yeah. End all the wars immediately. Bring all the combat troops home. The issue that the judge is concerned about is you can't just dismiss them immediately. They still have contracts. We don't want to just ship them right back out. We did that in Vietnam, and it caused havoc with our veteran community. I care about our veterans. We bring them home, absolutely, and the wars, bring them home, and then either agreement to transition them out. Either we give them money if they want to write off their contracts, or serve out your contract and then head home, whatever the case may be. Then audit all of our bases, to include Okinawa, as Ken said, and begin shutting them all down. Systematically get rid of all of our military-industrial complex. That is the answer. NATO, no need for NATO. Abandon NATO. Our charter is done. No NATO. Get out of NATO completely.
All right. Right on time, too.
And that definitely counts as a cut, by the way. I don't know that this would take as long to discharge people. If you start handing out early honorable discharges, and Larry Sharp knows this, he himself is a veteran. If you start handing out early honorable discharges, there will be lines around every base lining up. Listen, people try all kinds of stunts to get out of their military contracts. If you say, yeah, you can get out right now, you won't have a problem. People will be more than willing to be laid off if they can get out of those contracts.
I have an idea. We're to a close shortly, but I thought I'd just give each of you a chance to ask any of the other one of you three a question. Is there any question that any of you have for each other? So if you have one, tell us who it is and what's the question. Larry, do you have a question for your opponents there?
No, I love them both.
All right, Spike, how about you?
Smart move on Larry's part. When you're doing a media interview, you want to get as much airtime as possible and give the other people as little airtime as possible. The two things that Larry could have done there, and either would have been good, is to either just not give airtime to any of his opponents, or to ask a question that was so long and so self-beneficial that by the time the question was asked, it was more about him. Either one of those things. Larry's a pro. That was a good maneuver right there.
Well, I love them both too, but I do have a question, and this is actually a chance for Ken to clarify something that had been I had asked you during the Mises forum. I had asked you about with your national sales tax plan that it calls for a tax on just non-essential consumption, and of course we've seen recently with government arbitrarily deciding what is essential or non-essential.
Wait, what the hell just happened over here? What are we hearing more nonsense about national sales taxes? All right, guys, let me tell you something about political strategy over here. If you propose a cut and an increase at the same time, like end the income tax, add a sales tax, here's what's going to happen. You're going to do the enemy's work for them. You're going to make people mentally prepared for the sales tax. So the cut will never happen, ever, ever, ever. The national sales tax will happen. I mean, even Hillary Clinton was pushing for a national sales tax. And so you're going to end up just with the increase and not with the decrease. Fight for cuts, for God's sakes. Fight to cut government, not to cut and grow, not to grow and grow, just to cut and cut and cut. We don't need to replace any of this garbage with anything else. To paraphrase Harry Brown, our goal is to cut big government, not find some other way to fund it.
I had asked you who would determine whether what was essential and non-essential, and you said that the people would. So my point of clarification is, are you saying that there would be national referendums on what would be considered essential or non-essential, or that the people would choose legislators who would decide that? And if so, how is that substantively different from what we're going with now, where legislators are deciding what is or isn't essential?
Well, like I
See, that was a pro move right there from Spike. You see how he made the question nice and long to give himself equal airtime to the opponent. The other thing that he did nicely is he very politely put Ken Armstrong in a bind of the ridiculousness of his proposal. Let's see. I mean, obviously, the idea of a referendum on essential and non-essential items would be insane. And Spike has a point, which is that if you have elected officials doing it, that's exactly what we have right now. Let's see how Ken handles it.
said in that caucus, the first thing is we need to get rid of the IRS. I believe in pretty close to Gary Johnson's fair tax proposal, so we can use that as a model, and that means.
Boo. That is literally just another way to fund big government. The purpose here is you need to cut government, not find some alternative funding for it. You know, during the presidential debate, John Monds said something that I needed to hear. I need to hear somebody say, which is, I don't trust government. If you trust government, if you trust institutions, if you view value in established governmental institutions, then you don't have that core sense of what it really means to hate government and want to dismantle it, because you're going to end up just trying to replace one part with another part to try to do it, better. We don't need to do it better. We need to do it less. In my opinion, we need to do it not at all. Let's see what happens here.
That the 50 states would be managing the revenue, not the federal government. The federal government would be a ward of the states, not the other way around. So it wouldn't be up to the federal government to decide how that happens. It would be up to state and local governments to decide how that happens.
There is more corruption at the state and local level than there is at the federal level, because there's just less eyes on it, there's less oversight. Let me put it like this. Public schools are run at the state and local level. Public schools are the worst, most corrupt, most expensive, most damaging thing that happens in the country. So putting the state and local governments in charge is not making things any better. If anything, you're making things possibly quite a bit worse.
All right. And Ken, do you have any questions for Larry or Spike? Anything to clarify, follow up on?
Larry, tell us about your most humbling experience in your gubernatorial campaign.
Wow, there were many of them. I think the most important one, first off, I fired no one for incompetence because we screwed up all over the place because we didn't know what we were doing. The most humbling thing was understanding exactly how much money really mattered. I wasn't getting in polls, and I asked the pollsters, why am I not in the polls? And they literally said, because you're not buying polls. A poll with a large company cost about $40,000. I only raised $500,000. I know only $500,000. Am I going to drop 10% of that money, give or take, on a poll that I may not come up even do well in? And then I asked the media, why are you not covering me? And you know what they said? Well, you don't buy ads. Literally, it's pay to play. Politics is pay to play, and I had no idea how bad that was. I knew it mattered, but it really shocked me. I really believed in my heart when I first started running the campaign that if I was, a good candidate, I built a real team, I raised money, I was the official nominee, that the media would cover me, I'd get in debates, I believed it, and it didn't matter. It was about money.
Well, that's good to talk about. That was one of the questions I didn't get to is what about?
And Larry's right. Money is important, but it's also what do you do with the coverage, right? Larry got some decent coverage when he was running for governor. Not as much as he should have, not by any stretch of the imagination. But honestly, he didn't do anything that amazing with the coverage. The best thing he did was the marijuana like onions. That's fantastic. But there were, when he was on Rogan, he answered the question about government schools in such a way that was so bewildering that it was controversial. It was antagonistic, but not radical enough to be comprehensible, and not enough to really start an interesting conversation. And here's the thing, Larry Sharpe, I don't think he believes in government schools at all. I know he doesn't use them. I don't think he thinks they're a good idea. So he should have the least trouble with talking about abolishing government schools. He chose to take the soft way, and it didn't even work. But in other interviews, Larry Sharpe has done amazingly well. So if Larry is the nominee, I want to see the regulate marijuana like onions, the shut down foreign military bases, the leave NATO. I want to see that Larry Sharpe, the one that's actually talking about something, not the one who's either talking about nothing at all or stuff that's so vague or so convoluted and impossible to understand that it leaves the host bewildered as to what exactly the position even is.
Money, but you covered it pretty well there. Well, I think we should start wrapping it up here, and we're going to have 2 minutes each. So really hope that in your last 2 minutes summary, you'll tell us why you're the best candidate to get votes from non-libertarians. And
now, if in a closing statement you don't talk about cutting government, I don't even know what to say about that. Let's see what happens.
Anyway, 2 minutes to wrap it up, and we're going to go to the reporter. So, Ken, you get the last bit.
Well, it's been an incredible honor. I can't believe that this year of campaigning is about to come to a close. We're about to decide who our vice presidential and presidential nominees are going to be. I'm just incredibly honored to be able to talk to libertarians today and to ask them for their support. I want to remind you that as we go forward and nominate our candidates for president and vice president, in my opinion, the goal is to win. It was said tonight that we can't win. Our goal is to win. Our goal needs to always be to win, because if you're aiming at anything but victory, you're accepting defeat. And that said, I believe the best candidate outside of the party to engage the American people, to make them believe in the ticket that we present to them, that they can believe that the libertarians are giving them people who understand the issues, understand how government works, and knows where the huge failures in government really are and what to do about it. And I believe that if you look at my resume, if you look at my credentials, you see my service in government and my service in nonprofits.
Okay, you can have service in nonprofit, but government service is not service. It is theft-funded nonsense. Well, let's continue with this.
I work outside of the country with poor communities. You see that I've got a broad spectrum of background that comes to bear on exactly the kinds of issues that the vice president needs to support his president on. So I thank you in advance for your vote to nominate me as vice president of the United States.
All right. Thank you. That's very good timing. Spike, you're next. Tell us why you're the candidate to get votes from non-libertarians, and 2 minutes wrapped up on this one. Thank you.
Thanks. Guys, I have two very simple questions for you. Do you want to be free in your time, in our time? Not just you, but your loved ones, your families, the people you care about, everyone. And do you think we're on our way there? I definitely want to be free in our time. I want us all to be free. And we sure as hell are not on our way there yet. Folks, in the 6 months that I've been running for the VP nomination, I have traveled across this country to various state Libertarian Party conventions to speak with and listen to our delegates to help raise money for local and state affiliates and down ballot candidates. I've gone to Republican campaign events to successfully convert their supporters to our side. I've organized and participated in door knocking tours and housing projects, college events to help grow local and campus LP affiliates, promote local down ballot candidates, change the conversations in those neighborhoods and campuses. In each of these events, I have converted dozens and sometimes hundreds of people to the Libertarian Party and used the sales, leadership, and communication skills I learned from owning and operating a successful business for nearly 20 years to listen to people's concerns, identify their problems, and communicate the libertarian solution to those problems. My strategy is pretty straightforward. Listen to our constituents, demonstrate ourselves as trustworthy and caring, show them how the Republicrats have failed them, and explain how libertarianism is the answer. And if you'd like to be a part of this growing coalition, be sure to join me over here on Twitter at RealSpikeCohen or on Facebook at facebook.com/literally-SpikeCohen. In fact, if you go there right now, there's an event. You can come join us at the Zoom after party for the debate. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Spike Cohen. I am here to take our party and our movement to the next level. And with your nomination, we will continue to build a coalition of voters across the political spectrum and ride that momentum all the way to the White House. Now let's get to work.
It's not a bad speech, but literally, again, no cuts to government. Everything that Spike just said, and remember, I mean, Spike is realistically probably my favorite of the candidates, right? I mean, I don't think that's any big secret to anybody. But everything that Spike just said could have been said by anybody in any party. And Spike's messaging is often on point. I mean, I'm like, when Spike said to follow him on Facebook or Twitter, I recommend you do it because he's just funny and he's cool and he says amazingly insightful things. But there could have been so much more in that closing statement about actually cutting some government in some way, somehow making an actual pitch to cut government.
And Sharp, sound it away. You've got 2 minutes, sir, to wrap it up. Thank you.
From what these guys just said, they should be running for president. And that's awesome. Let them do that. You can look at their websites. It's Ken and it's Spike. Mine isn't. Mine says Gray Sharp because I realized something. This is support staff. Those things they've done and their resumes, while wonderful, after this nomination, most people aren't going to care. Most people don't even know what Mike Pence did before he was VP. Most people don't even know who Hillary's VP was or where he even came from. We are support staff. We have to put ourselves in a secondary spot to get our presidential candidate to the top. That's what I have done. That's what I will do. When it comes to moving people, no one's brought more big L libertarians to the party than I have. No one's raised more money. No one's helped more people. No one's supported more local candidates. And so what? That's not going to matter after this. What's going to matter is, can I get our presidential candidate to the top? If you believe what I believe, and that is ballot access, that is down ticket, our party growing. Spike wants to be free. Me too. We do that by winning at the bottom. By winning at the bottom. The only ticket that will do that, that has done that, is the Gray Sharp ticket. If you believe in me and what I've done and what I can do, if you think it's right, give me the right candidate to make that happen. That's someone who can raise the money, that can get the polls, that can get the backing, that understands the tactics that I used in New York and will take my failures and multiply them into successes across the nation. That's Judge Jim Gray and Larry Sharp. We have to make sure that we know what this job is about. Someone said we're not going to win. I didn't say that. I said I wouldn't be the vice president. That's what I said. Why? Because the way we can win is if the Congress actually selects us. If we get enough states to where it goes to Congress. How the Constitution works, if you know the Constitution, they pick from the top 3 for the president, but only top 2 from the vice president. That's why I can't be vice president, even if he's president. That's how the Constitution works. And I accept that. This is support staff. This is the best way to support our candidate. Thank you. Gray Sharp 2020.
Thank you very much, Larry Sharp, Spike Cohen, Ken Armstrong, for being here tonight. It's been very good to be with you and to hear your case for yourself.
All right, guys. That debate. I mean, listen, like I'm divided between Spike and Larry, and I probably slightly prefer Spike, but that debate was atrocious. You had in 48 minutes, all 3 candidates combined managed to just, in the most generous possible way that I could imagine, at most mention maybe 5 total cuts to government. 5 increases in freedom total between them. And that's, I mean, if that's what they then do when they're actually getting major media, and if any one of these guys will get plenty of major media coverage, whether they raise a lot of money or no money, they're going to get plenty of major media coverage. Listen, when Gary Johnson and Bill Weld were running, I was the vice chair. I got plenty of media because they couldn't do all of their media. It went Gary Johnson, then Bill Weld, then Nick Sarwark, than me. I got plenty of major media. So any of these guys are going to get plenty of major media. The problem is If they squander it and they let moderators and reporters turn their media interviews into these soft sell nothings, they're not going to be able to change culture. Listen, this culture has produced this government. If we want to change government, we have to change culture, which means you have to fight for the cultural change with every word you say, with every single part of your debate. In that debate, I should have heard hundreds of cuts to government. And in fairness, in the presidential debate, and I wasn't happy to be excluded from it, but in the presidential debate, there were hundreds of cuts to government mentioned. I don't know what happened over here tonight. I would have given the presidential debate a D for just being atrociously boring and having so many unnecessary increases or maintenance of government. But this, I would have to give an F. And these not because I don't like these guys. I like all these guys. I don't know Ken as well. I've gotten to know him a little bit during the campaign. Really seems like a really interesting guy. Larry I've known for a long time. Spike I've been following for years on social media. But this was terrible. And our president, our nominee, whoever he is, or whoever he or she is, and our vice presidential nominee, whoever he is, needs to be able to capitalize on the media we get, to use that to change culture so we can knock down this government. My name is Arvin Vohra. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching this debate with me today. And vice presidential candidates, please, if you get the nomination, do better than this so we can actually make a difference.